Please support this channel by subscribing. Your support means everything to us and helps us keep creating stories like this. Rain hammered New York like the city was trying to drown its own sins, and Serenity Price stood beneath a flickering streetlight, wondering if this was how people vanished quietly, soaked and unnoticed. Poverty had trained her well. Keep your head down. Don't be seen. Don't anger the powerful. Tonight, she was breaking all 3 rules by stepping into the gilded cage, a private club whispered about in landlord conversations and courtroom rumors. It wasn't just a club. It was a hunting ground for the elite, owned by a man people said hadn't aged in a century. Serenity didn't believe in myths. Myths didn't pay hospital bills. Myths didn't own half of Manhattan. But as she passed through the iron doors, the air changed, heavy with wealth, fear, and something cold or something ancient. Her first warning came before she ever met him. A manager hissed instructions like survival laws. Don't look VIPs in the eyes. Don't speak unless ordered. Never go to the penthouse unless summoned. Especially the penthouse. Serenity was assigned to Section B, a place the other waitresses avoided like a curse. She moved silently through the night, serving champagne to men who treated kindness like weakness and staff like disposable objects. She was used to humiliation, used to hands lingering too long and voices that forgot her name. By 2 a.m, her feet bled inside cheap heels, and her hands shook from exhaustion. That's when the summons came. Penthouse, vintage wine. Do not speak. Do not linger. Her stomach dropped. Everyone knew who lived above the club. Leonard Vralik, billionaire, recluse, rumored vampire king of the city's underworld. The tabloids laughed at that word. The underground DIDN single quotes T. The elevator ride up felt like a descent. When the doors opened, silence swallowed her whole. The penthouse was dark, wrapped in reinforced glass and shadows. A single man sat facing the skyline, motionless, like a statue carved from authority. Even with his back turned, his presence pressed against her chest, heavy and suffocating. Leonard Vralik didn't look human from the start. His stillness was wrong. His calm felt predatory. Serenity approached with shaking hands, uncorked the wine, and leaned forward to pour. That's when fate struck. Her heel caught the rug. The decanter slipped. Red wine drenched his suit like blood, spilling across marble. Crystal shattered. A shard sliced deep into Serenity's palm. The silence that followed was alive. Leonard stood slowly and turned. His face was beautiful, in a way that triggered fear, not comfort. Sharp cheekbones, marble skin, eyes glowing molten gold with vertical pupils that confirmed every whispered rumor, vampire, not metaphor, not legend, reality. He didn't look at the ruined suit. He stared at her bleeding hand like a starving man stares at fire. His nostrils flared. His body went still. Serenity backed away, sobbing, apologizing, begging him not to hurt her. In a blink, he was in front of her. His grip on her wrist was ice cold, inhumanly strong. She expected teeth. She expected death. Instead, he inhaled, deeply. Her blood reacted to him, humming in the air like it recognized him. Leonard's expression shattered hunger, shock, pain, memory all colliding at once. Vampires were supposed to see humans as food. Yet this blood stopped him, burned him, confused him. He released her as if she'd scorched him. Get out, he commanded, turning away, his voice strained with restraint that looked agonizing. Serenity ran. The elevator doors closed as she glanced back one last time. Leonard wasn't cleaning the wine. He was kneeling, touching her blood on the floor with reverence and terror, whispering a name he hadn't spoken in centuries. That night, Serenity thought she'd escaped a monster. She didn't know she'd just awakened a vampire king, who had spent 100 years controlling his hunger, and had just met the one human whose blood could break him. And that single drop of blood didn't end her life. It started a war. Asterisk morning arrived without mercy. Sunlight slipped through the cracked blinds of Serenity Price's studio apartment, landing on the bandage wrapped around her palm like proof that the night before had been real. Her body ached, her head throbbed, and fear sat heavy in her chest. She replayed the moment over and over, the gold eyes, the unnatural cold of his grip, the way the Vampire King had looked at her blood like it was both poison and salvation. She was sure she'd be fired, sued, or quietly erased. People like Leonard Vrolok didn't forgive mistakes. Vampires didn't forgive blood. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, dragging her out of the spiral. Unknown number. She ignored it. It buzzed again immediately, insistent, patient, powerful. With shaking fingers, she answered. The man introduced himself as Mr. Graves, speaking with the calm certainty of someone who never heard the word no. She was not fired. Mr. Vrolok wished to see her at once. A car was waiting downstairs. The call ended before she could refuse. Serenity sat frozen, staring at the peeling paint, then forced herself up. Running hadn't saved her last night. If a Vampire King wanted answers, hiding in Queens wouldn't change that. Outside, a black Maybach idled like a shadow that didn't belong on her street. The driver didn't speak as they crossed into Manhattan, and the city felt different, now smaller, like a chessboard owned by something ancient. Vrolok Tower rose from the skyline like a blade of glass. She was escorted through private corridors, bypassing security that bowed instead of questioned. Leonard waited in a vast office of stone and shadow, curtains drawn tight against the sun. He looked composed, immaculate, in a fresh suit, but Serenity felt the tension under his stillness, like a beast held by chains. He told her to sit without looking at her. Then he spoke her life aloud, her childhood, her mother's death, her father's illness, the debt crushing her future. He owned the bank. He owned the hospital. In his city, he was the law. Serenity felt anger spark through fear, but it died when he slid a contract across the desk. The salary was unreal. Enough to erase her debt in months. Enough to buy a life she'd never allowed herself to imagine. She asked why. Leonard finally looked at her, his gold eyes dimmed behind tinted glasses. He said she had done something rare. She had been terrified, but she hadn't frozen. She had tried to save the glass. She had apologized. In a world of sycophants who worshipped power, she had shown humanity. That mattered to him more than the wine. He stood and came closer, close enough that she felt cold radiating from his skin. He laid out rules with the gravity of a verdict. Never enter his private quarters without knocking 3 times. Never question what he ate or drank. And the third rule, his jaw tightened when he said it, if she ever cut herself, if she ever bled near him again, she was to run. Lock a door. Hide. Serenity asked if he was sick. For the first time, control cracked. He called it a condition. Old, hungry, dangerous. He told her to sign or leave. If she left, the debt remained. If she signed, it vanished today. Serenity thought of collection calls, of nights choosing between food and medicine, of being invisible. She signed. Weeks passed in a strange nocturnal rhythm. Serenity worked afternoons in the tower and nights at the club by Leonard's side. She learned the truth without being told. The sealed deliveries were blood. The mirrors never reflected him. Sunlight never touched his skin. Leonard Vrolok was a Vampire King hiding in plain sight, and he was terrified of losing control near her. He never touched her, never raised his voice, but his protection was constant, silent, absolute. She felt watched over and hunted at the same time. And the more time passed, the clearer it became. Her blood wasn't just tempting him. It was changing the balance of power around them, drawing dangerous eyes closer. Asterisk Victor Halloway arrived like a crack in the world Leonard Vrolok had carefully built, stepping out of the private elevator with a smile that didn't belong to anything human. Serenity felt him before she understood what she was seeing. A pressure in the air, a wrongness that made her blood hung beneath her skin. He was beautiful in a dangerous way, sandy blonde hair careless, violet eyes glowing faintly as if lit from within. Vampires move differently than humans. Leonard had taught her that without words, and Victor proved it with every lazy step. He didn't bow to Leonard. He didn't show respect. He acted like an equal, or worse, like someone who enjoyed pushing kings just to see them bleed. "So this is her," Victor said lightly, circling Serenity as if she were an object on display. "The human who made the vampire king spill wine and lose sleep." The word vampire landed heavy in Serenity's chest, not because she didn't know the truth, but because hearing it spoken so casually made her realize how fragile her safety really was. Leonard didn't rise from his seat, but the room responded to him anyway. The temperature dropped. Frost traced the edges of the glass walls. His gold eyes sharpened, no longer hidden behind calm. "Step away from her," he said, voice low and final. Victor laughed, lifting his hands, but the amusement didn't reach his eyes. He leaned in closer, inhaling deeply, and Serenity felt exposed in a way that went beyond fear. "Interesting," Victor murmured. "She doesn't smell like food. She smells like memory." Leonard moved between them faster than Serenity could track, his presence slamming into Victor like an invisible wall. "Leave," Leonard commanded. This time, Victor obeyed, but not before whispering a warning to Serenity as the elevator doors closed. Dragons burn what they love first. That night, Leonard sent Serenity home early. His control was fraying, and she saw it in the way his hands shook, in the crack splintering the mahogany bar beneath his grip. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. The monster was closer to the surface now, stirred by Victor's presence and by her blood. Days passed, and the tension grew. Leonard stayed farther away, his rules stricter, his restraint more painful to watch. Serenity began to understand the truth. Her existence near him was dangerous, not because he wanted to hurt her, but because he desperately didn't. When the Obsidian Gala approached, an elite masquerade hosted by Vrolok Industries, Leonard insisted she attend by his side, not as a server, but as protection. He dressed her in silver, placed a mask over her face, and kept her within arm's reach, like a promise he was afraid to break. The ballroom glittered with wealth and lies. Serenity managed donations and smiled politely while feeling eyes follow her movements. She could sense vampires hidden among the guests, ancient predators wrapped in silk and civility. The air felt tight, waiting. Needing space, she slipped onto the terrace, the cool night offering brief relief. That was when Victor stepped out of the shadows, unmasked, his smile sharp with intent. 2 other vampires flanked him, their eyes dull with hunger. "The masquerade laws are thin," Victor said softly. "And you are a weakness Leonard can't afford." Serenity backed toward the railing, heart pounding. When his men lunged, instinct took over. She fought, scratched, screamed, but strength meant nothing against immortal muscle. Victor drew a blade, slicing her arm with deliberate precision. Blood spilled, rich and powerful, and the scent exploded into the night like a signal fire. The world shattered. Glass doors burst outward as Leonard arrived in a blur of rage and shadow, no longer hiding what he was. His fangs were fully extended, eyes burning black and gold, his roar shaking stone. He tore through Victor's men with brutal speed, sending one over the railing like a broken doll. Victor fled, terror replacing arrogance. Serenity slid to the ground, bleeding, shaking, staring at Leonard as he turned toward her, hunger rolling off him in waves. "Run," he begged, voice breaking. "I am a vampire king, and right now you are the only thing I want to destroy." Instead of attacking, Leonard dropped to his knees, cracking the stone beneath him, choosing pain over her blood. And in that moment, Serenity understood the truth that changed everything. Asterisk, the night after the attack. Sleep abandoned Serenity completely. Every time she closed her eyes, she smelled blood and shattered glass. felt the cold stone beneath her knees, and saw the vampire king on his knees in front of her, fighting his own hunger like it was a living thing. Leonard had carried her from the terrace without a word, his movements careful, controlled, terrified of himself. She woke in a guest room of Vralik Tower, her arm expertly bandaged, the scent of antiseptic mixing with something older, metallic, and alive. Dawn crept toward the windows, but heavy blackout curtains sealed the room in shadow. She knew, without being told, that Leonard was nearby, watching from a distance he forced himself to keep. When he finally entered, his presence filled the room like gravity. He didn't look at her at first. He stood by the window, jaw tight, fists clenched, as if facing her was more dangerous than facing any enemy. When he spoke, his voice was stripped of power, raw and human. He apologized, not for what happened, but for what he was. He told her Victor's attack had broken ancient laws, that the Vampire Council would not ignore blood spilled so openly. By choosing to protect her, Leonard had exposed his weakness, and in vampire politics, weakness was an invitation to war. Within hours, the summons arrived. Not a call or message, but a symbol nailed to the reinforced doors of the penthouse. A dead black crow bound with silver wire, a scroll sealed in dark wax. Serenity felt dread coil in her stomach as Leonard read it in silence. The High Council had convened. He was accused of breaching the masquerade, harboring a human who knew the truth, and attacking a fellow vampire to protect her. If he refused the summons, every vampire in North America would be authorized to hunt them both. Leonard's decision was immediate. They would go. It was the only way to keep her alive. They descended beneath the city through hidden elevators and stone passages that smelled of earth and centuries of secrets. Serenity realized then how old his world truly was. How thin the layer of modern glass and steel was above something brutal and eternal. The undercroft opened like a nightmare cathedral. A massive circular chamber carved from ancient stone. Iron thrones rose from the floor, occupied by elders whose eyes gleamed with boredom and cruelty. Victor Holloway stood at the center, smug and uninjured, his violet eyes glittering with satisfaction. Leonard stepped forward, placing himself in front of Serenity without hesitation. The elders spoke of balance, secrecy, and law. They spoke of her as if she were an object, not a person. When they demanded she be brought forward, Leonard refused, his voice carrying the authority of a king who had ruled longer than nations. The room vibrated with tension. Then the truth surfaced, spoken with hunger and fear. Serenity's blood was different. Vitales, a living source of power that could heal vampires, strengthen them, even allow them to walk in sunlight for a time. The revelation rippled through the council like shockwaves. Serenity understood then why Leonard had reacted the way he did that night. Her blood wasn't just tempting. It was dangerous. The elders presented their judgment with cold efficiency. Serenity would not be allowed to remain human. A Vitali's walking free was too great a risk. She would be drained and destroyed, or Leonard would turn her into a vampire, stripping her blood of its power and binding her to the night forever. Leonard's control shattered. He refused both options, his voice breaking as he told them he would not kill her and would not damn her to immortality. The council laughed. There was no third choice. Leonard looked at Serenity then, truly looked at her, like he was memorizing every detail for the end. And then he did something no vampire king had done in over a century. He invoked the right of Ash, trial by combat. If he won, they would go free. If he lost, they would burn together. The chamber trembled as the council accepted. Gates opened, ears grinding, and a massive executioner stepped into the light, bred to kill vampires, armored and relentless. Leonard turned to Serenity, pressing keys into her hand, telling her to run when the fight began. But Serenity didn't hear a farewell. She heard a vow. The battle erupted in violence and stone-shattering force. And as Leonard was driven to the ground under the executioner's blows, Serenity realized the truth that terrified her more than death. Asterisk. The Undercroft shook with every blow of the executioner's warhammer. Ancient stone screaming under the force, meant to end kings. Leonard moved faster than any human eye could follow. A blur of shadow and fury, but the creature was built to counter immortals. Its skin absorbed slashes that would have torn lesser vampires apart, and its strength came without hesitation or mercy. Leonard struck again and again, but the hammer caught him mid-motion, sending him crashing into the arena wall with a sound like bone breaking against marble. Serenity screamed his name, fighting against the invisible pressure of fear and authority that pinned the spectators in place. Victor Holloway watched from the edge with thinly veiled delight, already tasting victory. Leonard pushed himself upright, blood dark and thick on his lips, one arm hanging uselessly at his side. Even broken, he stood tall, eyes burning gold as he faced the executioner once more. He glanced at Serenity and mouthed one word, "Run." The executioner charged, and this time the hammer connected fully. The impact drove Leonard into the ground, cracking the floor beneath him. The room went silent except for Serenity's sobs. The giant raised its weapon for the killing blow, and something inside her snapped. She didn't think about rules or monsters or councils. She saw only the man who had chosen to kneel rather than hurt her, who had carried her from danger, who had stood between her and death every time it mattered. Serenity broke free and ran into the arena, sliding across stone to shield Leonard's broken body with her own. Gasps rippled through the council. A human had entered sacred ground. The executioner hesitated, confused by the fragile heartbeat standing in its path. Leonard's eyes widened in horror. He begged her to move, his voice weak and fractured, but Serenity shook her head. Her hands trembled as she remembered Leonard's third rule. If you bleed, run. She met his gaze, tears streaking down her face, and whispered that this time, the rule was his. She took a jagged shard of stone and sliced her palm open, deeper than before. Pain exploded up her arm, but she didn't stop. The scent of her blood filled the chamber like wildfire, bright and overwhelming, carrying life so potent it made ancient vampires recoil. The executioner staggered back, roaring in confusion as the power washed over it. Serenity pressed her bleeding hand to Leonard's mouth. "Drink," she said, her voice breaking but firm. Leonard fought it, terror and hunger warring inside him. He knew what draining her could do. He knew what it could cost. But she leaned closer, trusting him completely, and the choice shattered him. When Leonard drank, the world changed. The pain was blinding for Serenity, her strength draining as if her life itself was being poured into him. But Leonard didn't just heal. He transformed. Bones snapped back into place. Wounds sealed in seconds. Light ignited beneath his skin, a terrifying golden radiance that cracked the arena floor. He released her gently, sealing her wound with reverent care, and stood. He no longer looked like a creature of night. He looked like something forged from dawn and shadow, eyes blazing like miniature suns. The executioner struck, and Leonard caught the hammer with one hand. The impact sent a shockwave through the chamber. Stone shattered. Fear spread through the council. Like poison. Leonard moved with impossible speed, dismantling the executioner in moments, slamming it into the ground with force that ended the fight instantly. Silence followed, broken only by his heavy breathing. He turned to the council, golden power fading but authority absolute. He asked if the debt was paid. No one argued. Victory was undeniable. Victor tried to flee, but Leonard's warning froze him where he stood. One more step into his city, and there would be no mercy. Victor vanished into the tunnels, defeated and broken. Leonard dropped to his knees beside Serenity, lifting her carefully into his arms. She was pale, weak, but alive. He whispered her name like a prayer, guilt and awe tangled in his voice. She smiled faintly, murmuring that no waitress could serve a king unless she saved him first. And then the darkness took her. Asterisk consciousness returned to Serenity slowly. Like rising through dark water toward light, she wasn't sure she deserved. The first thing she felt was warmth, real warmth, not the artificial heat of radiators or blankets. Silk sheets brushed her skin, cool and smooth, carrying a faint scent of lavender and ozone that she now associated with danger and safety all at once. When she opened her eyes, the ceiling above her was high and painted with storm clouds frozen in motion. She tried to move, but pain flared in her palm, now wrapped in clean white gauze. Memories flooded back in a rush: the arena, the hammer, the blood, Leonard falling. She sat up sharply, heart racing, fear overriding weakness. "Leonard," she whispered, her voice raw. Panic clawed at her chest as she scanned the room, until she noticed the balcony doors standing wide open and sunlight pouring freely inside. Leonard. Vralik stood on the terrace, bare-chested, facing the rising sun like a man greeting an old enemy. Serenity froze. Vampires burned in sunlight. She had seen the fear of it in every rule, every shadowed room, every sealed curtain. "Leonard," she cried, forcing herself out of bed despite the pain. "You have to move." "The sun." He turned toward her slowly, and she stopped breathing. The light didn't hurt him. It wrapped around him, softening the sharp edges of his immortal features, warming skin that had once been cold as stone. His eyes were no longer black or molten gold. They were honeyed, alive, human in a way that made her chest ache. "Easy," he said gently, crossing the room with a grace that felt different, now less predatory, more grounded. "You're safe," he explained quietly, sitting beside her without crowding her space. Her blood had done more than heal him. For a short time, it had burned away the curse that bound him fully to the night. He could feel warmth. He could stand in the sun. It wouldn't last forever, but it was a miracle no vampire had touched in centuries. Serenity stared at him, overwhelmed by the weight of what she'd done. She tried to apologize, but Leonard stopped her, taking her bandaged hand with a tenderness that made her eyes burn. He told her she had saved him twice, once from death, and once from becoming the monster he feared most. The council had honored the trial's outcome. No vampire would touch her. Victor Holloway was banished from Leonard's territory, stripped of influence and protection. The war she had almost started had ended before it could spread. Leonard stood and handed her a thick envelope. Inside was freedom in paper form, debt erased, properties settled, enough money to build any life she wanted. He told her she was no longer his employee. She could leave, go back to nursing school, find a normal life with normal sunlight and ordinary years that ended in peace. His voice didn't shake, but his eyes did. Serenity looked at the envelope, then at the open balcony, the city waking below them, unaware of the ancient battle fought beneath its streets. She thought of invisibility, of surviving instead of living, of being protected but never chosen. Slowly, she set the envelope aside. She stood, legs weak but resolve firm, and walked toward him. She told him she had seen the monster, yes, but she had also seen the man who knelt rather than hurt her, who chose restraint over hunger, who trusted her enough to be saved. She didn't want to be protected from his world. She wanted to stand in it beside him. Leonard's defenses finally crumbled. He asked her to stay not as a servant, not as a human shield, but as his equal, his partner, the one person who knew his darkness and didn't run. Serenity smiled through tears and said she thought a normal life might bore her anyway. Besides, someone had to stop him from ruining expensive suits. Leonard laughed, a real sound, rare and fragile, and kissed her slowly, reverently, like hope was something that could break if rushed. Outside, New York surged into motion, oblivious and loud. The city didn't know that its darkest king had been changed not by war or magic, but by kindness, and that a waitress who once spilled wine in fear now stood beside him by choice.